So, but we are not so-called on air. So, I'm Dmitry Vilensky. Actually, I'm also Institute of Radical Imagination here because I log in under our corporate name, and I'm very happy to continue today our series of assemblies, iteration, whatever you call it. We have a situation here, and for me, it was very challenging to moderate it with a great guest. It's already 6 times, and you can actually go online and check all the recordings. And I'm very happy today that we have Joanna Warsza and Florian Malzacher here with us. And when I thought about this event, how to discuss this transformation, and especially in relation between art in a broad sense, and of course was pretty much focused on art in public space and performing art. And I guess Joanna and Florian have amazing experience, not only during pandemic, but also before. And for them to share their reflection on these kind of dramatic changes, which we still, I don't know how to handle. At the moment, it's a big challenge. And also, I also suggest to frame it in more broad discussion on transformation of public sphere, from that live presence and interaction between bodies and artwork and so-called creating situations, and also in a wider political context, because in many countries, as we saw, that despite pandemic situation, people get out of the street in Belarus, in US, in Kyrgyzstan. And also funny stories that some people expect kind big outburst of contagious of the virus and people get to hospitals, but in reality, not much happened. And actually people start speculate in many ways that actually, if you demonstrate for good case, you're kind of protected. So was also that medical declaration of US doctors, I guess, was pretty strange and weird to read it. Anyway, I can also start with maybe my personal experience, because we have right now warming up, meeting some friends who also joining us in this room. Thanks so much. And I managed recently to cross the border of Russia, and actually also I would like to raise this issue that actually the new borders and new regulations incredibly damage any possibilities to walk as we used to walk. So you can't even inside the same country sometimes to travel. And luckily I have European German permission to residency permit, yeah. And that provide me certain type of access. And actually first time my colleague and partner Olga Yegorova managed to cross the border, not as an artist who invited to do something, but as a wife, you know. And we have a third person, was also complicated, because actually when we discussed with some representative of air companies, they didn't want to allow her to come, then coming guys from embassy in Moscow, so, and then finally decided that it's fine. But at the same time, another colleague, our choreographer, was not allowed to come, Nina Gasteva. And Nikolai, who was already in Italy, because he managed to get professional visa, discovered that it's almost impossible for him to come from Italy to Greece and return, because otherwise he will be again quarantined for 14 days, which was really big trouble for him. So, and then we were double lucky. Finally, Olga and me managed to come, and we start to work on performance in public space with Solidarity Schools in Piraeus. It's a very special, very important initiative of different Greek activists and especially teachers who actually managed to establish independent school which help migrants to pass through exams, language exams, study different subjects. And at this moment, that was also very, very tragic moment when it was a fire in the camp, you remember, and people was really afraid to participate, and also sometimes not possible. But, you know, formally speaking, it was regulation of 50 people. So we were quite inside. So we rehearsed, we really managed to meet, and we played on Sunday. On Sunday, it was 50. And on Monday, they published new regulation. It was supposed to be limited to 9 people, which if we would be just few days later, as we planned for Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, we couldn't do anything. So that's just personal stories, which I'm sure every one of you can share a lot. Yeah, but at the same time, it brings into question the whole situation for realization our professional duty and missions, you know. Because for us, this project was delayed many times, and then finally we managed to realize it and film, and it was really, really tiny, tiny chance. So, but at the same time, as we all receive that reports again from different places, like we all can share how things canceled, delayed, or put under such a strict limitation. We discussed with Alexandra Pirici, actually, partly because it was around monuments. And her project, yeah, which really face us with kind of big challenges. And also, I would like to maybe later focus on situation with education. Yesterday, we have a teacher from St. Petersburg, very good school, and she right now teach alone because she managed to persuade the administration that actually, because she teach practice, for her it's impossible to do it on a distance. So actually also was very important session with Vehave when we discuss education and limbo, because there are many speculation, and we know the practices, how big universities restructure the whole education online, and then the big issue, what kind of education come out of it, and especially in the case of art education, which was built completely on another convention, very personal encounters through workshops, through very and our school based completely on performance. We always actually talk about collective body, how build collective body, which you can really touch each other and create that kind of intimacy, which later can be realized in sort of collective folks and other enunciations. So yeah, I hope we all kind of right now not in a very cheerful mood, but at the same time, would be great to hear your impression, and especially I know that Joanna promised to talk about project on balconies because it was realized during the quarantine. Theo is joining us. And yeah, so we can start. So it will be really informal. So then Florian, because you just published a book on assembly, that theater as assembly, as far as I understood, right? So it would be also very interesting to have your reflection from more that performing theater vision. Yeah. I was in touch with Miller Rao in regarding the book Why Theater, and also his also school which he did for in Vienna. Well, in Vienna, I think it was in framework of this festival. Yeah. So thank you so much, Joanna. So if you'd like to share the screen, I guess you definitely can. If not, I can organize you. This.
Yeah, I would like this to have this possibility.
Please try. I guess it should.
I think you have to make me a co-host.
Just a moment. I'll try сделать соорганизатор. Yes, I got it.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I thought, actually, first of all, thank you. Nice to be in this black box with everyone. And of course, this is one of the outcomes of this situation, that we can have this kind of pop-up meetings. I think this is something pretty new, right? And this is what I will try to reflect in just this short input is some kind of maybe optimistic version of how I regain certain belief in public art and publicness throughout this period, and going against the current of public art understood rather as this plop art and the whole heavy baggage, negative baggage that public art had in recent decades, as something that is landing a little bit like a UFO very often, without context, without embeddedness. And also, I think what we've noticed, there is so much talk, of course, about, for example, in Germany, in the first wave of quarantine, there was very much this talk of what is system relevant, which professions are not, quoting David Graeber, bullshit jobs, which are non-bullshit jobs. And those professions were considered necessary for the society. So, for example, people working in those professions were allowed to still have schools or kindergarten or school service for them. So only those who really contributed to the maintenance of the society. And this notion of system relevance made me think about the fact that, of course, we as artists, curators, culture workers, well, where do we place ourselves? Because definitely we are not on the first line of system relevance. We are not providing masks. We are not saving lives. We definitely are not. However, do we consider ourselves as producers of so-called bullshit jobs? Hopefully also not. So where do we position ourselves within this kind of symbolic value that we are preoccupied with, and links between art and larger society? Because I guess, there are many art worlds, but the art world that we share probably in this black box today is also the one that maybe acts a little bit like a snowball and is connected with other parts of the society, and it tries to be neighbor and to bond with activism and other important questions of our times. So can art be considered a form of recovery? Can art be considered a form of a necessity? And can art be considered a form of almost an addiction or a drug, of a need? And finally, there was, of course, a lot of, we were grounded and we had to look closer and slower at where we are, who are our neighbors, where actually do we live, and which health system and which kind of privileges or disadvantages come with this. And from those reflections, together with my colleague Ovul Durmuzoglu, who is a Turkish curator also based in Berlin and my neighbor, we did a project on inviting our neighbors, artist neighbors. It was also important to invite people who will comment on the situation from the perspective of exactly somebody who is not a system relevant, but who is maybe trying to say something about the society which can be relevant, to exhibit something from their domestic sphere, from their domestic space. So either from their windows or balconies. And it was during April, so it was during in the middle of the lockdown, of the first lockdown, let's say the hard lockdown. And the need for this project actually came from within this confinement on one hand. So, and I think this is also important, art language is a language somehow able to challenge the confinements or regulations, and especially us from Eastern Europe. I think we know this legacy pretty well. On one hand. On the other hand, this project also came from somehow a willingness to go against this digitalization of museums and art world and art institutions, and the fact that, especially at the beginning, we felt very much that museums pretend nothing happened, and now everything will be online, and there will be another guided tour and another digital viewing room, etc. And then we also felt like, wait a minute, this is somehow wrong. Like the business pretends everything is going on, but actually, if we want to go on, I mean, we probably have to go on. We believe in what we do, so we should go on, but we should go on disturbed and not undisturbed. This is also something that made me revisit of the times of, annexation of Crimea and what it means to actually relate to the major events. How can we relate to it? How can we embrace it in our work? So from this going on disturbed and not undisturbed, we proposed this project to our neighbors, and somehow we were overwhelmed that many of them felt, right, yes, like let's communicate with each other, let's send each other signals, let's use our windows and balconies and it was, of course, it was, like somebody said, a German way, because in Italy those things happened in the civic, much more in the civic sphere. Maybe there would be not a need for such a project in Italy. However, in Germany, it gained another layer. And finally, also, it was like somehow an attempt to deal with Berlin and with the fact, the privilege, a huge privilege we have, first being in Germany, which with its health system compared to, for example, Poland, where my family is from, but also with the fact that there are so many amazing artists and cultural producers, even I would say per square meter, living here compared to other places. And yet there is some kind of void and phantom presence of many of us, or in Berlin, very few of us, I mean, many of us, like even I see David here. I think, David, you are based in Berlin. I haven't seen you for years. You are rather working in Graz. We kind of are not really connected, even if we chose Berlin as our living place. So this is one of the characteristics of the privilege of living in Berlin. We enjoy this city, and somehow as cultural producers, we are kind of phantomatic. So the Balcone, the project, was also proposing to see ourselves as cultural producers, but also as neighbors and as a community that we are not. So just I will like to walk you through. So where is my album? Just a moment. Sorry. Just few examples to. Sorry, no, I close this. Just to show you where it led us. But why I don't see this? Yeah, here. Sure, okay. Yeah, so the project was very analog, only paper things printed on the posters. Also, of course, certain questions of privacy in general, publicness and privacy were very important questions here, but also certain questions of privacy in the sense that we didn't want to give anybody private address and put it online. So at the end, we decided against this kind of GPS-ization of the world. So you would have an artist list, but you would not have a place or address where this artist lives. So in a sense of how also we perceive art, very often when we go to big events, to big exhibitions, we look for some names we know and we kind of explore it in this maybe extractivist manner of, okay, where is this famous artist? Where is this famous artist? We are all part of this kind of experience, and we tried to unify it. So we have here is a group of artists working in this district, and the only curatorial choice for that project was the district, so was the place where you live. Of course, a privileged place, Prenzlauer Berg, a gentrified part of East Berlin, but with its very interesting history of artist squads and of the publicness produced in the private. It was also here that the punk scene was happening. It was here that the apartment exhibitions, so common in Russia, were also in East Germany happening here. So there were also other layers than this just last layer of bioladens and playgrounds and all that. So that is how it functioned analogly. When I try to, should be able to open it like this, maybe. Yeah, and then just a moment. Just going through some examples of. Sorry, I don't know why it doesn't work. Okay, I will just I will just work with particular artwork. So hello. Yeah, right. Okay. Can you see it or not? Here. Can you see it now? Yeah. Yeah. Right. So let me just show you, for example, the way the response. So this is, for example, a work of Ulf Aminde, who is originally from West Germany, but was part of this actually Kreuzberg street culture, and then moved in the 90s to East Berlin. And he says that he looks at the legacy of East German artists as a club to which he doesn't belong, but he would like to. And he lives, or his studio is on Max Linganer Strasse. Max Linganer was an anti-fascist artist in East Germany who has been first involved in anti-fascist resistance, but then later in East Germany, social realist artists making huge mosaics, for example, in Leipziger Strasse, maybe some of you have seen it, huge mosaic building of the New Republic from 1953, of part of building a GDR. And Ulf's piece was to put the foot, he called it footwork of this huge mosaic, one-to-one scale in his balcony, asking of questions of what this anti-fascist resistance would mean today. And this is very much related to Ulf's work as a professor at Weizsäcker, and the fact that he has founded a so-called foundation class, a class for newcomers and refugees after 2015, showing that actually a school, even bending the legislation, but showing the school can react, that the school can react to the to what was happening in 2015. So this is an example of like how, in very spontaneous, very quick, of course, zero budget, zero opening, zero previews, zero things that are normally are part of ecology of art, just the core of artist expression, addressing his street, his location, his neighborhood, and his current dilemmas connected with the people who have lived there before. Another example of its kind of performative act of Yael Bartana and her partner Saskia Bendland. And that's also interesting. They are both artists. They live together. They have never worked together. So this project also pushed these barriers of what my work, what my artistic production is, because very often those works were produced from within the domestic, from inside home. And this is, they called it reset. And that was a spring cleaning, so to say. So usually you see this kind of boxes put up outside the doors with things you don't need anymore, and you kind of pass it over to other people who pass by. And they did this as an act of throwing objects through the window. So the objects were also falling down in different rhythms. And in this empty, completely airy streets in April, laying down as this installation for 2 days. There was also, we invited also some writers. This is a tribute to On Kavara by Elke Buhr and Toby Müller. Jumping through, there were actually a number of installations with this kind of a motive of escape. Also interesting, to see, of course, reflecting on that moment. This is an installation by Christina Mitriades, a Greek-German artist. Then, yeah, we kind of also got to know artists, from their domestic side. This is Sam Durant, Anna Pravaki, and their daughter. They did also, again, they worked together. They never worked together. They did this sound installation. It was because the project was lasting for 2 days, Sunday and Monday. They did a Sunday piece and a Monday piece. This is like calculation of time. This, how is it called? The instrument that measures time. Sorry?
Metronome?
Metronome, yeah, thank you. Metronomes, actually, it was the only one that went out of domestic sphere And that's interesting. And it was not really, I mean, it was destroyed, not in the sense that the instruments were not destroyed, but they were taken off because it was too much of a sound pressure for one of the neighbors. And that's also interesting. Of course, the work going out of your window, going out your balcony, it's in another sphere. So of course, it's in another realm of right and art. Olaf Glavert installation with famous Bruno Latour 7 questions, what we want to go back to and what not. Also Jan Peter Hammer. This is a beautiful installation of Hanna Hurcik, who is an artist dealing always with conversation. Somebody says there is never a boring conversation with her. And this is somehow what she also played with. She put this very simple banner on her balcony, call, this is her number, kein Notfall in German, in English, no urgency. So also not, that was a very particular time. So also to make clear, it's not somebody dying there. And then she would have people living opposite to her for 15 years call and get in conversation with her. And she would have a long conversation with anyone who would call. Also non-human neighbors. This is an installation of Christoph Keller of birds who have been nesting and building their own balcony since years, always in the same spot. So he's kind of putting it up. Also simple decorations of the building. So making a building decorate for this, or meditative piece of Xavier Leroy. And one work, Rabbi Mrouet and Lina Madeleine, who actually reached out to their neighbors within their building. So they decorated together their own building. So that was also a way to get to know people who live next to each other, while they did this very intimate, beautiful exhibition on the ground floor on different balconies and cultural context of balconies. And finally, I mean, I'm not going to show all of them, but what I wanted to also show is that also, playgrounds were closed. This is a very simple proposal of Antje Stahl and Felix Mota. And that's maybe one of my favorite installations by David Rich, who used the institution of intercom, of ringing a bell, something we still, before mobile phones, might remember of communicating with others for ringing a bell. And you could just buzz the intercom. And today, for example, he was arranging this kind of readings on the intercom, and his son would read you a choice from their home library, depending on your interest. And this they were specifying every day. So here was a speculative fiction and apocalyptic anthropology was being read that day. So this project, what happened very spontaneously and somehow out of a need, of course, out of a need of people who are privileged and are just in their domestic confinement, but yet made us raise those questions, whether, where can we place ourselves between system relevance and the bullshit production, and how can art and how relate to some kind of sanity and mental health. And at the end also, it was a way, to make certain, in a small scale, believe that art, the need of art is to create freedom within confinement, is a way of shaping relations, is a way of maybe now dealing with intimacy, and the question that art needs to become a little bit more intimate in order to survive, in order to go on. It's maybe a way of overcoming fear and of creating some kind of togetherness in terms of, in the sense of neighborhood. And of course, come back to very important questions we often ask ourselves: how to live together, and how to live together within that situation. Right, so I'll finish here. And that was a short report from the Balcone, and I'm happy together with you to discuss this, or questions rather that come out of this project, maybe, or of the situation also for public art. And very often, before Florian takes over, just to say that we take a lens of visual arts. And in visual arts, the intimacy is possible because you can create very quickly a situation of dealing with art one-to-one, or like here in the Balcone, the production is from within the domestic, but we are outside walking in the streets as individuals, and yet it brings us together. So there is a collectivity and individuality at the same time. For theater, for performing arts, it's so much more complicated because the essence of this art is actually to experience something together. So on one hand, I think we deal with this big obstacles, especially for performing arts. So it's like a call to solidarize a little bit more with performing arts. But on the other hand, maybe it's a moment to also rethink public art and the question, what actually is public when we speak about public art? It's called public art, but why is it called public art? Which kind of publicness we understand in it? And can this publicness now be revived in those times of confinement and sorrow and anxiety?
Thank you, Joanna.
Yeah.
Actually, I would like to ask Sarah, as far as I remember, Reina Sofia also made something or initiated something in Madrid. Did it happen? Because it was after Berlin, I guess, yeah? Can you?
Yes. On my notes, that's one of the points to Johanna. Thank you for the great presentation. I think it's so beautiful, the project, and yeah, it speaks a lot about the times we are living. Yes, there's something, I was thinking that there is something about the proximity, no, this neighborhood sense also, no, this possibility of being present in this togetherness you were talking about. That is something that we all artists and the people in general and institutions are feeling like, or that should act as a motor of desire, or try to build up a desire that allow us to, in these times that sometimes are so great, to keep this energy, or of motor of desire for this togetherness. On that sense, I was thinking, for example, for art institutions, I'm in contact with several of them because I work in the Internationale, that is the Confederation of Museums that have proposed this project Dmitry was meaning. So Reina Sofia was part, but it was all the 7 institutions that were involved. But in Reina Sofia, for example, well, I was saying, I feel this lack sometimes of connection with the institution and the real usefulness and utility and symbolic weight the institution have, and the important role museums should take right now, also in allowing this proximity. For example, Reina Sofia, now it's a big institution that it's always full of tourists, of big groups. The amount of visitors are so huge, and it's and more or the bigger part of this audience are this kind of tourists or people that is traveling and want to see an art institution. But we have developed for the last years a very strong leg of our work that is in relation with this neighborhood and proximity. That is Museo Situado, situated museum. That is one of the dispositives we are developing, and that has to do with the neighborhoods of Lavapiés. That is the neighborhood in which Reina Sofia is. That is also a neighborhood in a process of a very strong gentrification, but also it's full of other communities and a lot of migrant communities that have a long history of associationism, yes, associative movements in the neighborhood. That, for example, right now with the situation, they cannot do their work in the sense that we have a limitation of 6 people in a room, and the museum seems to be the only space that can allow bigger numbers for keep doing this work, communitarian work, also in relation with artists in many cases. And for example, so now we are working in a communitarian health schools of COVID, with voluntary doctors of the neighborhood that are also activists and that are developing tools to translate and to allow the communities to understand how they can fit with these sanitary procedures to be safe in their own communities. Or also a project that is, today there is, for example, a big, an homage to all the translators that have been working in an activist way in the neighborhood these months to allow the people to get sanitary health, because there are no translators in the health system. So a lot of the migrant communities remains aside of the sanitary system. Or we have the situation of a neighborhood that he died because he was not attended. He was calling to the hospital for 6 days. He was from Bangladesh and he was never attended, no, because they didn't understand. So we have developed with the neighborhood several projects on that. So yes, I think these proximity projects are allowing us, no, to find some sense on and responsibility and some possibilities for art and for art institutions. But there is the other, to me also, this black box you were mentioning, no, this other online dimension that yes, institutions as well and are developing a lot. And indeed, I started hearing debates whether institutions, yesterday in Spanish TV, whether institutions should start to put fees for the online contents in order to generate also another kind of incomes for the institution. That is, well, at least for us, is a crazy and non-fruitful debate. But also this online dimension that give us these spaces like the School of Mutations we are developing, no, have strongly, to me, make this sensation of togetherness really abroad, no, of another kind of proximity that is so far away, no, the people that is connecting. And in that sense, L'Internazionale committed this Confederation of Museums at the beginning, also starting like in April, with this debate, how institutions can support artists in this moment in which institutions cannot spend, you know, this, in general for public institution, the regulation is that you cannot pay for a work that is not being done. So there was this whole idea of all the cancellations and how this will affect to the whole artistic ecosystem and how we can imagine another ways to support. And on this very first moment, the idea came to commission works of artists that every institution should curate a piece of 2 artists, not to invite 2 artists to produce a piece from their spaces where they were in confinement. Also in this relation with the window or the balcony as the new connection to the public sphere, no, or something that was generating a new public sphere that should be also taken into account, also due to the different symbolic and collective expressions, for example, to support the sanitary workers, no, in the different countries and so on. But how can art could take a role also in this space? And it was an interesting project because at the end it also, in some cases, was a reflection on the medium as well, like that we were using, because the project was supposed to be, it could be physical, it could have different, no, levels of action, even material, but it was thought to be a stream, to be disseminated online. So they need to do this kind of translation on how we can disseminate a project like this. And yeah, many of them reminds me, when I was seeing your presentation, many of them reminds me to that idea of getting doing something in the neighborhood, but also others were in a total different way. And it was yeah, I'm going to share the link in the chat so you can see, and I don't want to talk that much because
yeah, thank you. Because actually, I guess the most interesting and maybe most pressing issue is that system relevance, because art is a kind of semi-autonomous articulation and was actually subjugated to completely another law of creating public. We actually discussed that certain shift, and also with David, so how we shift from artistic challenges to the challenges of the care and reproductive work and all that stuff, which was always interconnected with artistic missions, but at the same time was a kind of secondary thing. Right now it becomes primary. And then that what is at stake, how we really reconfigure art systems through that kind of compositions of care, relevance, and proximity to community in a new way, because it integrates certain kind of issues of health and mental health, and it's really, really complicated, I would say. If you don't mind, I would really like maybe to hear contribution of Florian, because as Joanna finished with that kind of vulnerability of performing art in the theater, which compared to visual art really is in a big, big challenge, because what can you do when you can't really assemble real bodies in the real space? So please, Florian, and maybe you speak about your books or whatever you feel relevant here. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have a lecture presented, so I just give some thoughts and then we can maybe talk about it. I think for theater, of course, the idea of assembling, of coming together is, I mean, it's two things. I mean, on first hand, we have, and both were mentioned, and they're connected, of course, but one is the pragmatic situation. So you cannot really work in this medium at the moment, or you can work with a lot of restrictions, and every country has their own ways. Or sometimes you have to sit with a mask, but you can go there. Sometimes there's barely 20 people in a huge hall. Sometimes they have this chessboard system. So there's always a different way of doing it, but it's very fragile. And it's actually now for a couple of weeks it was working, and now it's already going back. So of course, on a pragmatic level, it basically a lot of things cannot happen. I would say, especially in conventional theater situations of a kind of frontal stage situation. But of course, this is just the tip of the iceberg, so to say, or the most visible or pragmatic problem, because yeah, theater needs this proximity as a medium. So there's also no way to move somewhere else. I mean, there was a lot of streaming going on, and still is, which I was a bit surprised and also a bit skeptical about, because I mean, I understood the idea or the need to do something, and wanting to stay part of the conversation, but it was kind of surprising that basically from one moment to the other, the same people that would say, no, theater is only live, it doesn't work any other way, you can not watch it in video, it's and it has to be ephemeric, etc. From one day to the other, basically streamed every VHS cassette they could find in their archives. So which I find also a bit tricky in the sense of an argument that what is your unique selling point if you're willing to give it up so fast. I mean, you can say it also proved that it's not the same, but still it's an ambivalent situation. And just to say, because Dmitry, you mentioned already, of course, the question of intimacy of bodies close together, which is one big aspect, of course, of theater, that there's a certain intimacy, even if you sit in a conventional theater setup, I would say, but especially more and more ambitious projects. But I think there's also something more structural, more political in a structural sense to the medium of theater, which needs an assembly of people. But basically, theater is if you wish, a kind of a paradoxic machine, which allows you to be inside something, inside a performance, and at the same time to watch you from the outside. It's always a double play of a real situation, the real situation you are in as real people, and the fictitious situation, even if the fiction might be very narrow, if it's a performance or whatever, but still it has the two levels of real and fictitious, or real and invented, imaginary, utopian, whatever, and that's true to even the most conventional theater forms. But I think it's especially true to more ambitious theater forms. And this construction of being inside and outside, of being in a real situation and in a fictitious situation, is, I think, for me also that's the special political potential of theater, because it kind of brings in a reflection. So theater can be intimate, it can be immersive to a degree, but at the same time is self-reflective, and that's, or at least the theater I'm interested in. I would put a focus on this, and this obviously is not possible in front of a screen. This double take. You need because not even only because of the intimacy and the proximity to other bodies and to other people, but also in terms of the, let's say, the theatrical contract. You understand the frame that you understand when you go into a situation, which you don't have when you watch something at home. So it's like it has also a more abstract layer to it. So in this situation, I think theater is really in a very tricky situation, because there's no way to migrate to other forms to a degree. You can work with distance. You can work with distance between people. You can do one-to-one shows or whatever. But still, you would need this kind of construction of a situation to have your potential as a theater. So this being said, and Don can say, okay, then the only consequence is let's hope we can move back to where we have been, which is part of it. But of course, there's also now finding out what ways do we have to deal with the situation now. But they said it already shows, I think theater in a way is a bit an anachronistic and a bit an old-fashioned medium, because there's no escape into it. It would turn into another medium if it would become more and more digitalized, more and more online, which might be fine. So it's not about judging the value of it, but it would be something else. Theater itself will always, to be theater, will need this proximity. But of course, it can play with it in different ways, because it can also, of course, like in an online version or in online works or digital works or whatever, you can relate to, you can kind of remember or relate to this proximity without having it. So we still have some of this theater in ourselves that we can maybe activate in certain situations. So to give an example for that, and I think there are a lot of artists working on it, but one I'm involved in is a project together with Jonas Stahl, the Dutch artist, which I've been collaborating with for the last couple of years on a project called Training for the Future, and which is maybe on the borders to theater, but it relates very much to what we're talking about. And we did it in a very huge scale version at the Ruhrtriennale with trainings of I don't know, 100 people at the same time in space with artists, activists, and so on. So it was very much based on this, and it was trainers and people from literally all over the world, and we wanted to continue this, and this is of course not possible. And at the same time, you can say it's also good. We already there had to rethink: does it make sense to bring people from all over the world to do a training in the Ruhr area in Germany? I mean, maybe that's anyway not the most intelligent thing to do at the moment for other reasons, and now it's even impossible. So we are, for example, trying to rethink of something which could allow proximity and maybe even intimacy and interaction in the theater situation locally in different places, but will be completely decentralized. So that you don't travel to encounter certain training, but there will be trainings parallel, and there will be a way of checking in, and then there can be a digital or an online way to have these encounters, but they're always based still on your own physical presence in a concrete situation. So there might be 10 or 12 or whatever satellites all over the world, and then you can say, yeah, we can negotiate this, but I think it always needs this reference point to coming back. Before I maybe finish this, to rather talk a little bit about it, I would say, and I just saw, if she's still there, I saw that Monika Gintersdorfer had joined us, who recently told me when we were actually on a walk, which is the other COVID medium that developed a lot. You have walks with people, you have Zoom conversations, but you have also walks. So we were recently on a walk with Monika Gintersdorfer, who is a German-based theater director with a company that largely consists also of members from Ivory Coast and other African countries, and has another company in Paris and so on. So it's very much based also on a more global view of a planetary view of the situation, that there is a certain discussion going on now, arguing against international work, against traveling, against presenting all over the world, which for the theater scene I'm speaking of, is a tricky thing, because of course we all understand that less traveling might make sense. But for example, to say, okay, artists from Ivory Coast cannot come and work here anymore, or they should live here, which they are not allowed to, or like all these complications or these implications it have come also to the table. So I think all arts, but maybe especially in international theater scene, theater and performance and dance scene, has to develop models which acknowledge the situation, which will not go away with COVID, because it's also related then to climate change and other things, but at the same time insist of not becoming provincial or national, which is of course the thing we are dealing with all over the place as well. So that's another thing where I think we will have to develop new relations between these two things. And I think theater is a good place because of this old-fashionedness and slightly slowness of the medium, and certain stubbornness and sometimes annoying resilience towards change of this medium. It's a good place to recalibrate these questions of proximity and distance, of locality and planetary ideas, I think. So I'm actually kind of curious, less about more streaming, but much more about how this relationship will be negotiated within this medium, which for me is a perfect medium to do so.
Thank you, Florian, because actually for us, and you know that integration of performing art into visual art and actually very kind of hybrid formats are super important. And actually that's the core issue of that assembly, because assembly is more political word compared to maybe other expressions. So, and I guess that insistence on that kind of new possibility of assembly, which actually, yeah, it's pure speculation, but at the same time, that destruction of the monuments. So actually, I discussed with Alexandra Pirici what kind of performances around this destruction and how artists can challenge them in more kind of delicate, more kind of symbolic way, because what we saw, that live events in US and UK, in Ukraine, so it was really such a powerful gesture, performative gesture, almost theatrical, with the speeches, with transformation of the squares, which actually happened during pandemic. That's why I was trying to bring that kind of real urgency. So, I mean, that will see that certain kind of violation of that kind of pandemic quarantine rules through that political events, if art can rival that urgency and bring people, create kind of new assembly despite that fear, despite that absolutely necessary measures, which are absolutely clear. So, and this is really interesting things, which also maybe I also like that idea of prefiguration, that how right now, actually for us, we can not demand the return back to that, whatever we call normality, but at the same time, in prefigure that new type of politics and new type of assemblies, which right now, that you also mentioned, that possibility of that translocal. So for example, even our School of Mutation and IRI is decentralized. So something can happen in Madrid, something can happen in Venice, in Athens, and yeah, in St. Petersburg, and actually create a certain kind of new composition of bodies, which unfortunately at the moment can't get together in a physical way. Also, it's not just pandemic measures, but the measures, as you correctly mentioned, of that kind of climate change. We can't travel as hell as we used to. It's quite clear, but at the same time creates that kind of relation of testing that political and aesthetic ground in different locations. That for me, it was really very important, because even with our school, with education, when we cannot get together. So we anticipate that new gatherings. So we prepare them, we cook them, but at the same time, I think that we should strongly, despite the absolutely necessity to use this means like we use now, so but at the same time, imagine how we all together manage to challenge that kind of new, very tough regulations, which might likely stay with us in post-pandemic, you know, because that all that dystopian situation with this new testing, control, that idea of that the body are contagious, that the body are dirty. Recently, I got very interesting remark, I think it was in one article, that actually what really make people really paranoid, and especially right-wing, because before they knew exactly what is the dirty body, what is the clean body. And dirty body was always associated with a migrant, with a Roma, with whoever alien, you know? And right now, that the danger might come from your own daughter, you know, who come from the school. So you're absolutely lost. Everyone can be dangerous, you know? And this create completely new kind of feeling, which we should really oppose and insist on certain form of trust, care, and connections. So, and how far we can do it in this situation, which absolutely legitimate restriction, but at the same time, vision how we get out it without getting back into even more dystopian situation. So I'm stopped here. I don't know. Maybe you have some comments. Oh, yes, Sarah, you'd like to say?
Yes.
Please.
Yes. No, that was what Florian shared makes me think, remember some conversations I have here in my home with my roommate during the confinement, because she's a dramaturgist. She worked in theater, also in communitarian theater projects, and we were looking back to the 30s in Spain during the Second Republic, when there was this project, Las Misiones Pedagógicas, the pedagogical missions, that were artists going in the Spanish geography to little villages, also to the cities, in a kind of like an activist and supporting and making culture available for everybody in a Spain in which the people most of the people couldn't still read or write. And we were thinking of, for example, La Barraca, that was Lorca's project. The company, they did also this kind of projects, no? And we were trying to think what can theater could do. And I have to say that, for example, in Spain, today I have tickets for the theater in an hour. And they are demanding a lot how as culture is a safe space. We haven't have any contagious in a theater play or in a concert or no, and there is this extreme control of all the conditions and everything, and testing the actors and the companies and so on. But for myself, I have feel, because I understand, for example, theater in open spaces in Spain, we have a lot of months that you can do, that you can work outside. Of course, for the companies and for the tiny private theaters, this is a big challenge, and it's really difficult to put in, no? To build up a model like that with their resources. But I have felt a lack of risk or of experimentation, for example, in the state institutions of theater, like the National Center for Dramatic Arts, that haven't think any or proposed any project in that, no, or experiment with a dispositive, even look into the 30s that were already done, no, that could help us imagine how theater can also be sustained for the people, because we have a lack of that, no. We need theater, and I haven't seen any intelligence or experimentation or radical imagination on that, and I think it's pity.
Well, I would say, I mean, there is, of course, I would say, yeah, the repertory theater, the state and municipal theaters, they tend to be a bit slower on this, but also because, of course, they think very much still in certain spaces which are more difficult to use, obviously. So there are quite a few attempts to deal with this, and of course there are experimental forms in terms of site-specific works, outside works, etc., that already go in this direction. I'm not sure they all help really very much with the COVID situation, because also you know, because what is even worse, I mean, now this is pragmatically, but what is worse than sitting in a theater is moving. So if you want to move in the theater space or in a space, you already reduce the number again by, I don't know, from 50 to 10 or whatever. So the worst thing you can do now is certain non-conventional theater forms, or new conventional, because they are not so new, but so in a way then it's even better you stay on your seat. But of course, generally I think it might bring the idea that things should be more flexible and also more context specific also in theater. That would be a good thing to learn for some of the venues, of course, with the limitations that are given there. But of course, also not all countries have the weather you have, so so that's also bringing a certain limit to things.
Yeah, totally. I was just talking about the Spain. But, yes.
but I find, I mean, on an anecdotal level, what I find interesting that, of course, it happens even in conventional theater spaces now, where you always say, okay, there's still the idea to focus on the performance as something separate from the audience. So you turn off the light or you don't turn it off, but you have it kind of separated in thought. So due to the measurements that you have, there's a new awareness of the presence of the audience in these spaces, because at least as long as they are not used to it. So you still feel like, aha, why am I sitting like this in the space? Why there's a distance going in with a mask? Can I take it off? So suddenly the collective body of the audience is quite present even in the most conventional shows, which won't be when we get used to it. Then we just do it. But for the moment, it would for theater, it would be a good moment to learn something out of it. And of course, that's very different from the situation in a museum at the moment, where you might, depending on which country you are in, you might have to book a certain slot when you're allowed in, and you have to wear a mask or not to wear a mask. But besides this, you're on your own, and you're anyway in this neoliberal mode of spending 30 seconds with the work you don't like and move on. Kind of freedom. I know that visual arts are proud of this freedom. I always found it rather a very liberal or neoliberal take on art. But so the situation in the museum space changed very little, with the exception of a few works. But that's of course very different in theater.
Yeah, sure, but at the same time, you know, with integration of performative works inside museums, that really kind of serious, this similar limitation like the theater. But I agree also with Sarah that actually it might be like with the balcony project, as we see, actually, I guess we still may be too modest to test that possibilities which still kind of with us, like you mentioned the walks, you mentioned certain type of more intimate gathering, crossing certain kind of spaces. I guess there are still possible. Actually, in St. Petersburg, we have certain kind of possibilities to work with that kind of intimate public or in confidential circles where people trust their bodies and actually also, frankly to say, take the risk. For example, inside our small collective, we are not dissident in COVID sense, but at the same time, we can say, okay, guys, formally speaking, those who can't participate, we do our best to create possibilities of distant participation through Zoom, through streaming, but at the same time, those of you who are ready to take a risk, let's do it. And actually right now, I see many people who are kind of activist type of spaces, maybe not state places where many things still happens. And yeah, and I really respect these efforts, because for me, it belongs to that kind of, you know, we take that risk of getting maybe sick, but at the same time, we keep certain kind of mental health of our community, because as I see also that people who drop out really in a big risk of that kind of psychological damage. And this for me, it's really one of another, because right now, you know, we see three kind of crises. First, obvious, it's pandemic crisis with all the hygienic measures and restriction. Second one is pretty also obvious, it's economic one, very much connected, because through lockdowns, through impossibility to do your job, you not get your wage, your fees, nothing. And third one, I guess maybe one most uncalculatable, it's psychological damage, which I see particularly among young generation, not only, you know, we have right now a very important activist group who work with a new suicide wave. So we actually get reports in this group on Facebook about more and more suicides, especially among not just teenagers, but quite young group of people. Recently, this incident, not incident, the tragedy happened in the school of our daughter when boy, very good boy, just dropped, go into the window, went into the window and died, you know, nobody expect. And actually right now, because of certain connection with that activists who work with the mental health groups, so I see more and more issues, and I see the danger more and more present and more close. So, and these three crises, when they come together, we should really be aware and stay certain kind of find possibilities to balance that different risk when certain measures would not ruin other important components of our lives, I would say. Yeah, and it's hard, but this exactly for me new composition of that public, you know, dimension.
And just to clarify, because maybe I'm not sure if when I was saying that I feel a lack of risk or taking the risk, I wasn't meaning taking the risk to put the people in danger, but taking the risk, for example, for a public institution like the National Theater to go for a dispositive, for example, something in the open air in which you can apply your regular measures, no? And you can avoid the idea of if you have more tickets that legitimates your operation, not to renounce to these kind of standards and go for a more hybrid format that maybe you cannot measure, no, because it's in a square, it's in a, I think it should, so that public institutions at least can take that risk, but of course, private and tiny companies or theaters, or I don't want to be naive, because also the people that works in the theater needs to eat every day, and it's also made for a living, no, for the artist and the whole crew. And
I mean, yeah, I think for institution, it's of course difficult also because of a certain responsibility. So all the tests, and if one theater has a case, I mean, it will have consequences for many, but still, yes, how to navigate this. Actually, it's a pity that David left, because I was wondering, because Steirischer Herbst Festival very early moved very online. And I was a bit, they had some analog outside events, but I was a bit surprised about, I would have liked to hear more about this decision actually to give up the idea of, actually, which turned out to be the only time in the whole year where you could have done something, was the time where the festival was happening. So it would have been interesting to hear a bit what was the reason for the decision to very early on kind of decide to not see if this chance could be used or not.
He apologized that he was actually.
No, it's of course.
Yeah, but at the same time, I agree.
Because it was
yeah, we have to really be sensitive to the permanently changing situation, because situation change every week. So what was possible, as I mentioned at the beginning, yesterday was 50 people, today is 9 people. What can you do? What can you plan? You know, that another kind of crisis of planning, when you can really foresee what will happen, you know. Yeah.
Can I comment?
Yeah,
actually, coming to what Sarah said, that maybe certain theaters, certain big institutions don't take enough risk in performing arts. Of course, I don't have an overview, but I observed this festival, Tanz im August, so Dance in August, that happens in August in Berlin. And they were all digital. They went all digital. And you ask yourself, why actually wouldn't you use this opportunity to go outside, to make another dimension of what dance could be in the public sphere. How can it really reach out? Because very often, curatorial statements are full of how we want to reach out to the society, how we want to gain relevance. Why don't you use these circumstances actually to try to gain this relevance and to gain this passerbys and to be random out there? It didn't go this way. So I was also, that was a moment that I was like, also thinking about this. And the second comment I wanted to make is also that we, feel all restrained from not possibility of meeting physically. On one hand, it's absolutely true. I think we all feel it. We all feel that also physical meeting, even going to a party, is a form of a trance. It's a need, it's a really deep need to kind of be there, and stroll around. But on the other hand, we should also remember what digital media and digital dimension has done to us as bodies in the space, because many conferences we have attended, many public events we have attended, you see people physically as 200 bodies in the space, but maybe 100 of them are absent because they are on their mobiles and they're somewhere else with their mind, right? So I think that also what this situation makes us ask is what would be the sane relation between the digital and analog. Now we are feeling we are too digital, we are too constrained to the digitality, but we are also digital when we were together, 200 people in one room. So how can we send each other signals and use the public realm to find the balance between digital and analog? And I think that in the Balcone, there was this moment, because obviously the Balcone would never happen without the digital. We had to reach out to each other. We had to, gather information, exchange, publicize the project. But there was a joy of doing these things together analogly. So each, and it was in the quarantine, the hard time of lockdown. So we didn't meet, 50 artists of this project, they didn't meet. Many of them didn't know each other, even if they lived on the same street. But the fact that we were all in our domestic spaces, producing art, which you can see through the window, producing signals, and gave some kind of a rejoicement that this is not only on the screen. So there was a marriage, I think a healthy marriage in that situation, which makes me ask these questions. How can we work on one hand on this transnational questions, creating these boxes like here, jumping in this conversation in other countries? It's beautiful. But how can we also go back downstairs where I live with my neighbors, do something which has a relevance here, and maybe send and share to you? So this is maybe what, to be trying to be an optimist of the situation. How can we offer this new and rethink this dimension between digital and analog through public sphere and public space?
Totally agree. Yeah. Sarah, you wanted?
Can I ask you, Johanna, about the project first? Maybe you said and I missed a bit, but how was the decision taken? The decision taking process of the whole exhibition? Were there like collective conversations on how was that process? And the second is, what have you done? How are you thinking of creating a memory of the project that can remain in a way? Like
right. Yeah, well, so the project was born from a conversation in the park, because there was out of the sudden a time to go for a walk, right? It was unheard for me, other than like with my small child, other than this, I would not go for a walk. And then out of sudden, Ovul and me, my neighbor, we went for a walk. So we started to talk about these things, the meanings of the Balcone, what I explained before, the fact that we are so many artists out of the sudden, curators together in this space in Berlin. So also what characterizes Berlin in those times. And we addressed this invitation, and basically, because it was out of, let's say, solidarity and communication, we couldn't apply the curatorial gatekeeping. Obviously, it didn't feel right now to say, oh, we invite this artist, or we don't like this proposal. It's impossible. And that was also very liberating for us as curators, because I very much also realized in recent years, I was so much like fetishizing a commission. I'm commissioning this artist to do something here, and this is so important. And here, out of the sun, there was all this freedom of invitation, and invitation was to everyone who we who knew somebody else who is an artist or curator or cultural worker, because that was important. It was not just to invite everybody to communicate in the balconies. It was from our language, so to say, that we share. But the contribution, of course, you are free to do what you want. And if some artists really came back to us and wanted to discuss, we were very open to it, but we didn't make any, evaluation or control or anything that curator usually does, right? So we only took the part of curation, which is caring, hopefully, right? So that was liberating. That was very liberating. And also the fact that, that this is not a constructing of an artist list of who is the best. It's who lives within this, let's say, postal code. That was our choice of artists. And obviously it's impossible to reach to everyone, but within a very short time, we gathered a long list of neighbors.
Actually.
And the memory? The second question?
I'm sorry. Forgot about memory. Memory. So, this project, in a sense, became viral. It really was covered by media all around the world. It was really so interesting that such a local project became so well spread. And we keep receiving some kind of questions for photos and interviews, etc. And we actually think, because we understood that the pandemic is something we are going to live with for a year or 2 or 3. And we are now really seriously discussing to do in April a new edition. A little bit, on one hand, as a memory of this moment, because probably we'll never go back to such a harsh lockdown. So on one hand, memory of this moment, but on the other hand, kind of a temperature check of where we are in this place as neighbors and this artist, and some of them, of course, amazing artists, as it happens, and where we are at, and it could become kind of a measurement of our understanding of ourselves, of a public sphere, of our relation with the pandemic, of our relation with recovery and art recovery. So hopefully we will do another edition in April, as even big biennials were sometimes provoked by certain rupture of time. And they celebrated, Gwangju Biennial was there because of democratic uprising in Korea in 1980. And we, according a little bit following this logic, it's a memory of this time that hopefully will be alive every year in some form.
Cool. And actually, I maybe would like to bring that. You might remember at the beginning of that quarantine and lockdowns, there was kind of speculation of State Commission of Public Art as a kind of, in US in the 30s, Hans Ulrich Holbrichs talk about it. But same time, it didn't develop much. You, Sarah, mentioned that you commissioned some artists to do something in relation to their indoor confinement and connected with outdoors, but at the same time, we haven't heard about that kind of large commission. Some governments gave some peanuts to artists as a kind of quarantine money or compensation for the loss of possibilities to work. And also we experienced few times also that kind of commissions for public art in the form of posters action. Actually, we did a lot, and in our show and state of concept in Athens, we actually use the whole front windows to collect all these posters which we produce and actually connect that territory inside the gallery with outside, because the gallery works limited time, and actually during the opening people mostly gathering outside in the big numbers and a very limited number inside. It was very interesting. Yeah, very interesting contrast, how you create a safe space and at the same time people don't care much. And and for us was very challenging, because actually, and especially with Kunsthalle Vienna, when it was really kind of big billboards printed out, which actually question many situations. So have you ever reconsider that kind of responsibility of society, or is it really create relevance or not really? Is it kind of fake substitution of real interaction with community? Too much frontal, too much kind of advertisement style? I don't know. So for us, it's really right now, we also, for example, feel relieved because we right now can't do much, but at the same time, we got commission from one Russian institution, from Garage, for big new production, which we hopefully manage to do in the next 3 months. So, and really help us to survive, because otherwise you get really crazy, you know. So for me, that's the lack of that kind of connection between large artistic community. I'm sure that many people would like to rehearse, because, you know, for us, for example, production of the film takes usually half a year. Right now, we actually have to be more quick, so in 4 months. But at the same time, I would imagine it will be much more healthy situation inside our communities if we could really concentrate to work on something. Not really present, but maybe really do that internal work with a clear idea that at one moment it will really appear for the public. So, and this moment of concentration, which sometimes, frankly to say, we lack, because, you know, right now, yeah, we're all disturbed by these online meetings, small things, but at the same time, we previously was permanently kind of facing lack of time. You know, you really need to make a serious work, like you write a novel, you know, to make a film, you need a lot of time, you know. Right now, that actually bring collective and we can communicate, and right now we discuss different mode of feeling. I don't know if we need bigger group to make a test, or simply trust each other that we're all healthy and we can really get and film at this moment, you know. Actually, also very interesting how it also affects film production, because I understood that many companies keep on filming because they making tests twice a day or something like that, and then really manage to work in pavilions or even outside. So yeah, it's somehow cooking something. Yeah.
Actually, you know, today I was speaking to Yael Bartana, the artist. She managed to film completely empty Berlin at 5 in the morning in June or May or something. And she was so happy, you know, like out of the sudden I can like empty Hauptbahnhof, empty Brandenburger Tor, empty Tiergarten.
Yeah,
So of course, for film medium as such, there are also
some possibilities. Yeah, sure. Yeah, but this kind of commission could really facilitate and really save many things.
Of course.
Yeah, and also for us, also big issue how this possible restart when, you know, so many projects delayed, some coming one over each other. So, and especially, you know, even big events like Venice Biennial, what kind of work they exhibit, you know, what kind of new commission, how artists change their approach. So I think here we face fundamental tasks, so which was really kind of, if we don't know also if it continues for a few more years or it will be resolved already in April and we're going back to normal, but what kind of normality we face, even pragmatically, logistically. So many things was not realized and even disappear, you know, and that's a big issue. So I see some messages in the chat. You see from Monica. Okay. Maybe Monica, you'd like to maybe talk, or you just communicate via messages. It's hard to follow, you know, but it's just more kind of a comments. Yeah, analog digital combination are possible working with the people present and people absent. Yeah, that's actually very plausible comment. So yeah,
I can jump in with some words. I've been listening with a lot of attention. I'm a dancer, choreographer. My world is my body and the space. And of course, within the Institute, we've been talking a lot about also all the fantastic challenges that this change was triggering into all of us. I missed, unfortunately, the beginning of the talk because I couldn't hear you before, but I still am pretty puzzled and confused about our discussions, because theater in the last years has really tried to disrupt all the charismas of the dispositive. Like, it's normal for a festival, like we have a festival in Naples, and it's normal, it's fantastic, it's super cool that we perform on the rooftops and we perform in the restaurants and we perform. Naples is a city that doesn't have many theaters, many black boxes. So theater has already learned formulas to produce and go up there. It's nothing new. It's not such an adjustment that's required or needed. Not anything new from a curator's point of view or an artistic director, nor from this fantastic desire of artists to try to go into non-conventional places. I mean, we've been doing it all the time. So what is the problem now? Why now we have a problem with that? Okay, and another thing is that sometimes, for example, it's not so easy to go up there, because also to go up there for a dancer needs conditions. For example, like I was thinking about what we said about the Tanzim August. I've not had any information about why did they go digital. Many platforms, many festivals decided to go on the digital format more, and I think far and foremost because they try to replicate the audience and educate the audience to pay a ticket, even if the performance was online. For me, in this choice, there is, of course, an economic choice, and it tells me something about the attitude we use, the artistic practice of performing art, which is, are we more biased towards, I want to dialogue with my very small audience and elite to provide the cool, trendy production that speaks to the equal. So the most interesting thing is watch the new production, watch it, not participate to it, as Florian was saying, you know, as assemblies coming together, assemblies of people coming together. So am I worried more to share the aesthetic outcome of something with my peers? Or sometimes I am forced to do that because, for example, as a dancer, I swear I cannot train at home. I need a floor. I need a flexible floor. My body is heavily affected by this situation. It's not the same thing. It's not, why can't a violinist train just with some cords attached to the roof? Because the floor for a dancer is an instrument. It's fundamental. It's not the exception. Like for the kind of dance, the aesthetic, the development that we've been living in, for the way we talk about dance, because dance is so many things. Dance is also dance with common bodies. Dance is dance with tennis shoes in the street. Okay, so given the fact that artistically, we've been exploring and experimenting out of the black box, out of the white box, out there. Where is the problem now? And I think that the problem now is that, one, that's not my free choice. So the art as an artistic practice of freedom is restrained. And two, it's that, for example, for my practice, my breath is my danger. And this is really powerful. Like, to be with other dancers, breathing, exchanging breath, it's really dangerous. And I dance with my mask on, and I cannot dance because I need to breathe. So this is so powerful as a limitation for a body. And also another point that makes life difficult, like, for example, I have the example, like, if I look at the way the Teatros del Canal in Spain, in Madrid is working, they have scaled down, they have created all the conditions, and they are programming as they were. Probably they were earning less, but the program of dance and theater is going on.
Normally. I'm sorry, my microphone has expired, so I don't know if you can hear me as before.
Even better, Gabriel.
Okay, good. So theaters are programming as before, and yet it's not true that it's such a safe place, mainly and foremost for the companies. Because, for example, in Naples, our comrades in a company got positive before the premiere, just 2 days before the premiere. One person was COVID positive. And of course, how do you manage that situation? The entire company is being tested and they cannot go to the premiere. And who's gonna support the costs? Like, we live into a very level of uncertainty, and I cannot comply with my commitment with the theater because I cannot really perform. Who's going to pay the cost for that? What's going to happen? Okay, so one other thing is, for sure, our system, not simply into the performing arts sector, but into artistic, any situation we were used to deal with inside the cultural realm and outside of it, needs to face this strong uncertainty and capacity to respond and to readjust towards the public. But for me, the most really important thing is the fact that we are not coming together. That, I mean, for me, that is the greatest point of the performing art, theater, dispositive. It was not so much, like, it's not so much like as an artist, I create a dispositive, like my work, my creation is a dispositive that triggers something that works as a dispositive on the audience. And so the important thing is for the audience to be there and for the audience to share that time and that moment and have the possibility to exchange into that. And even this, I mean, this is the problem, is that we lived in times where sharing and connecting on a physical level is dangerous. So I cannot comment with my neighbor. I cannot have the freedom to exchange with the other person out there out of a comment if I don't know the person. So that there is all this human dimension around the dispositive of the creation that is just there to trigger something into all of us there that fails, that is really limited. And yes, and also I was very, very lost into this very first moments we experienced during confinement, between this dialogue of digital, analog and digital, and to go out there and to, like, I read all the experiments I've been watching were very poor, much more of a cry, you know, to reach out there in a way or the other. But for sure, to experiment into another means is another story. That is something that I have very clear. And so it's not that I am into performing arts and so I can go up there, so I go digital. It's really not the same thing, and I think we all have this very clear. Then for sure we can experiment, we can merge and see what happens. But as the life of activism, performing arts need to be out there in the bodies, and need to be out there with the possibility to exchange with other bodies.
Yeah, Sarah. Thank you, Gabriela. So I totally agree with that. So, but at the same time, you know, we have right now, I like what you say about the flow as a friend, as a something which really your medium, your partners, which can create something new together. You didn't hear me? Yeah? Yeah?
Can you repeat? Yeah,
No. I mean, that we are absolutely in the same plane with that kind of mounting that impossibility of us, that how time is going away and we can't really realize our proximity, our connectiveness. And yeah, so at the same time, I think that I'm really trying to problematize that risk, because actually for me, that's the feeling of the danger which we all kind of share. At the same time, you know, the danger connected to certain kind of estimation of risk. What is important for you, that what I said, that three kind of crises. So for me sometimes, and I also check that for me, that to keep the mission, to keep that promise of certain kind of mental health, you know, for me, I need people, you know, I will die if I don't meet them, you know, so my neighbors, my students. So I don't know, as far as we agree that for us, it's much more important that we take this risk of our health. And, you know, that particular, that tragic moment of our life. And actually we should really experience that certain kind of tragedy. So tragedy always somehow connected with the destiny. Maybe Russian people too much into that kind of destiny mode, but at the same time, yeah. So, and that's for me, as you explain. Also, I like what you say, it's not my free choice. That's why I'm not getting into it. Before I can dance on the roof, send signals, you know, like used to be before, but now, because it's the only thing which I can do, I might be not doing that. So that also psychologically, first time I heard that kind of explanation, which for me, very legitimate explanation why not so much experimentation are taking place right now, because you kind of forced into that experimentation. For example, in August, when we actually first time saw the possibility of doing that festival of mutation, you know, we say, no, we do it a real show. This is the risk, we'll take it, because that's what people need. And people are amazingly hungry for that kind of experiences right now. I notice it in Greece and many other places. It's also quite interesting that how relevance also coming from the point which actually we saw completely saturated. Who cares about exhibition? Right now I see kind of opposite trend, and I see that particular people and general public, they also coming. It was big exhibition in St. Petersburg, which was also delayed for, it was planned for February and then finally opened in August. It was huge lines, you know, there. People really want to take their risk because, you know, because we actually created that, not we, but in general, it's objective and subjective, you know, how that issue of pandemic, you know, that people going there taking this risk because they really want to go. They really need to encounter some kind of meet together in the community and encounter art and performances and the theater. So yeah, it's a very interesting reverse situation. Before we spoke about that kind of over production and so on. Right now we have less production and more public who actually want to come. Sarah wanted to add something, yeah?
Yes, yes. Well, and about different things you guys have been saying. For what you were saying now, Dmitry, for example, in the museum, the public activities we are doing, they are full.
Yes, that's what I mentioned.
The tickets are for free, but they run out in 1 hour, and people wants to go there and wants to take the risk. But one of the things that Gabriela was saying that also Florian mentioned before with the online theater, and in relation with what you said, with there is this new generation that, because I think now what we are going to have is not going to be normal, the old normality. We are going to a new model of something we don't know yet, but there's a matter of generation thing that I was seeing yesterday, in this debate of museums, as the Galleria degli Uffici in Florence. During the confinement, they got their profile in TikTok, and they, this new social media of the youngers, and they have like now thousands of followers, and the news was saying like how museums will be in the future, and there was this kind of jokes with the Primavera de Botticelli and many painters, and as a new experience of a museum. And I was thinking that on the generation that is starting to visit in museums like that, or that is starting attending theater pieces like that, and in the how we are going to, how we can imagine all these desires of the floor that you were mentioning, or being with the floor, going to them as well, in this new scenario we are going to live in, and that's how, that's one of my concerns right now. But the desire should be there, and we need to put some light in some moments, because otherwise, we cannot go on.
Yeah, I just have something very small to say, but there is a difference. Every time I am in the digital format, I am here. I am really with my senses. I am up here. I am not here. And the way I experience things, maybe for, I don't know, people who are normally up here, like more used to an everyday world that starts from the head on top, eyes, ears, rationality. This is the comfort zone, which is also not, they're not aware of the fact that is not the comfort zone. But if I experience something and I am really standing in front of the Botticelli with my body, with my senses open, and I look at it into the frame, I really receive it in a different way, in a very partial way, like my senses, my experience, my aesthetic, sensitive experience of that is reduced. And okay, that the new millennials, digital generations are absolutely comfortable with the means and with the dimension, but they are also not comfortable with the body. Like, this is the same reason why when we work with millennials, we see that they're really not in their bodies. And this is also something that is in a way affecting society. So it's very open.
You know, Gabriela, actually, when you talk, you see that millennials not comfortable with the bodies, it's a judgment from another generation. I guess they have completely another idea of the body.
Oh no, I can refer to many studies of psychologists and psychiatrists who are, decoding problems on that level. And I will not go into the specificity of that, but it's not generational. It's something that's being observed.
But at the same time, you're right, because actually, when we talk right now in so-called digital public sphere, like Zoom actually proliferating, with enormous number of participants and gaining enormous money out of it. So actually, you're right. So we create completely new type of body screen platform relations. I wouldn't simply deny it's not a new public sphere. It is. So, and actually it can be used in different ways, in particular for maybe young generations, they feel maybe more comfortable than their teachers who deliver online courses or make an education. So we have to be really sensitive to it, because that the idea of that kind of media and physical borders are completely changing. I'm a bit afraid with you, because actually my imagination about that personal encounter with Botticelli or performance of Alexandre Pirici or with the balcony art or whatever. So it should immediate encounters. So that's really the things, and that balance which we already have discussed and put into question between analog and digital, off and online, that really create completely new form of publicness. And we have really just developing it together like today, And yeah, I'm not sure if we really managed to resolve all that issues. I know that Joanna leaving tomorrow. Where are you going? You mentioned Wrocław.
Yeah, I was supposed to, but now it will be online from my home.
I see. So you're not traveling tomorrow.
No.
But it was Wrocław you mentioned.
Yes.
I see.
Right.
Okay, we usually try to also that kind of new digital culture. For me, I'm also feel that 2 hours on Zoom is maybe my maximum. Of course, I can stay longer and enjoy it too, but at the same time, I'm always trying to keep it somehow balance, and I need to go out for a walk and drink something in a real bar. So because Zooms are really sometimes, it's also, I don't know how your impression, but I share, because many of my friends are professional teachers, they feel completely devastating after Zooms. Despite importance, they really understand that it's certain also very nice new form of intimacy. I see your home, sometimes cats passing by, kids pop up, some noises. So it's really very interesting combination between public and private in a new kind of digital kind of realm. So, but at the same time, we really need to keep our balance, and I hope we manage to save our space, to be sane, not to get mad. And and meet again in both possible ways, but hopefully in a physical one very, very, very soon. Thank you so much. If you don't have any urgent question, Christian, you'd like to say something? No.
I just like to be invited back. So that this has turned into something of a kind of a cocktail party. And as you were saying, the intimacy and the unexpected intimacy of it, it's very exciting to me. I think that can be an opportunity. And I wanted to see if that might be okay to maybe introduce myself, because I see a bit of a different position from where I'm coming from, like live from a child's bedroom, because at a child's virtual school desk, they're on Wellness Wednesday today, and they're off at an outside playing, and then they'll be back at this desk tomorrow, and I'll be working in some other floating place within the house. But I wanted to say, if it's okay, I know we're all Zoom exhausted, but I'm I'm coming to you from North Carolina in the U.S. I'm part of an interdisciplinary humanities lab at Duke. It's called the Speculative Sensation Lab. And I'm also forming like an art and research collective in Durham that I'm tentatively calling like the Institute for the Experimental Everyday. And I don't mean to take, I hope to join into the formation of institutes if open to other terms. But my background's in poetics, and I'm trying to develop, developed the experimental everyday as a feminist epistemology and a community art and research practice that I'm formalizing here in Durham because I live here, but also because it's my hometown, and I'm deeply rooted in a sense of place, but also really interested in the expansive digital formation of communities that's happening in COVID. And I'm really attracted to what is being said about this idea that there's not much experimentation taking place, and I'm very sensitive to how, what Gabriella was saying about the painfulness of having your practice taken from you, but then at the same time, this idea that situations that communities and people in their everyday lives are being forced into, and the one that I'm particularly interested in is in the public school system here. And so the project that I'm working on right now is with children in the Durham public school system who are currently in fully virtual school, have been for 10 months, will probably be at least until January, but we sort of know how things are going in the American South, and I think it's going to be a long duration, something that for their lives, for elementary school children who are only 5 to 10 years old, this is a gigantic proportion of their lives and will have this impact and so many afterlives within the community. And so I'm working with kids within my children. I've got 2 children in elementary school, 1 younger, and it's also the school where I went as a youngster. But it's also very important that this was a school that was built for Black children prior to desegregation in the South, which in North Carolina didn't occur until 1969. So it's not as far in the distance as anyone would want it to. And I'm co-producing it with the Speculative Sensation Lab, but also with Black leaders within the elementary school. And these are both spaces that are part of my everyday. Everyone is linked within my social world, and it's also a kind of a radically sincere practice. It must be sincere at every point, but also to try to generate, to pop my head through the clouds and generate this practice as something that can have some capital within the academy. Because something that Florian said really spoke to me, this idea of what can be politically active within this moment. And for me, I'm really trying to figure out how to think about the everyday in the way that everyone here has been talking about the theater and about these spaces that I don't think of anything that I do as performance, but at the same time, it really needs to be legible within those spaces if I want to have any kind of artistic capital or academic capital for that kind of project. And so I'm sorry, I went on much longer than I expected. You just got a bit excited in the moment.
Yeah, okay.
Wanted to everyone.
Yes, it's very interesting. If you would be so kind to put in the chat some of the links of the projects or work you've been mentioning right now, because when we close the session, it will be in our chat and archive, and we will, have a trace of that. So if you can put the links in the chat of the institute you were referring to, would be lovely to have the chance to go back to it.
That sounds great. I'm struggling because my internet does not seem to, it must be working because you guys are still speaking to me. Let me just type this in really quickly so that you guys can go.
No, we don't have it.
No, I appreciate this apportunity. And as I said, I had just planned, as I scribbled tons of notes, and I'm really interested in all of your practices. But with this unexpected intimacy, it was an amazing opportunity to make a connection and to learn more and to hopefully be invited back.
Yeah, great. Yeah, this is also something that sometimes we worry when we don't have masses interacting, but it is also from the beginning, so also a dimension of a real possibility of encounter. where people can have the time really to talk and exchange and to go a little bit more in depth without the superficiality of the boxes and the formats. So that's also meant to be a space like that. Thank you very much for the links.
Yeah, but I also would like to mention that for me, you know, that eerie meetings, that online connection, when you stay completely isolated, yeah, it really helps a little bit to get that another dimension without travel. You see faces, you see, actually encounter situation from very personal experiences. I guess it's very, very important. And this is exactly what that new form of publicness is about. And we hope we'll be back into completely new, transformed, mutating way, and hope it will be healthy and positive mutation. Thanks everyone. It was really pleasure. Yeah, thanks for joining.
Thank you, Dima, for the invitation.
Yeah. I turning off everyone. So yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.